Welcome to Nobody Knows Anything. Today we bring on a Republican strategist, spooky, scary, to tell us everything we don't know about the Republican Party. We take a look at the GOP's view of the midterms, the presidential, and the TV Reservation Wars, the most consequential thing in news today. All that and more today on Nobody Knows Anything.
Nobody knows anything.
Well, folks, we have our first ever guest here on Nobody Knows Anything in person in the Pain Cave. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Liam Donovan, an esteemed Republican strategist from the firm Targeted Victory. Liam, welcome to the show. I'm so sorry that you decided to spend this time with us when you could have been doing literally anything else.
You told me nobody'd be watching, so I can say what I think. It's a good sandbox for me, but I appreciate
Can confirm, yeah. Road test your stuff that you want real people to see.
100%. Really, all of that. So, Liam, talk your book for 30 seconds. Who are you? Where'd you come from? What's your background? Republican extraordinaire.
Yeah, I'd say I am a recovering lobbyist. I started my career on the campaign side, working at the Republican Senatorial Committee, seen a really rough cycle in 08, saw a really good one in 2010, went into the advocacy arena, so lobbying for a variety of industries and companies for about 15 years, built up a Twitter presence on the writing and talking, and then got away from the game. I think things have changed so fundamentally in the Trump era that I think the way power is moving, the way the media is operating, the way distribution works, I think this is a good example of it. I feel like the puck's moving in a different direction. So I switched over to Targeted Victory last year, kind of less lobbying per se and more zooming out and looking at public affairs in a holistic way. And so excited to be here.
And Targeted Victory is a public affairs shop, kind of came out of digital, came out of Mitt Romney 12, right?
That's right. That's right. And Zach Moffett and Abe Adams and Ryan Mearstein started this firm and built it into kind of a mammoth digital consultancy on the campaign side. And then in the more later iteration, built it in kind of a corporate public affairs operation, and kind of came over recently to build out what that looks like at the kind of higher end strategic C-suite level.
Right on. So if you hear that, America, digital consultancy started by losers of presidential campaigns can be successful. All right? It can be fine.
You're doing just fine, buddy.
And no, I'm on a podcast of 100 people.
The future of the GOP.
One of the biggest questions that is standing before us, which is what is going on with Donald Trump? Donald Trump having, at least from our view, a bit of a rough week. His net approval from Nate Silver down net negative 18. Those are Biden numbers, baby. We are. So he's having a little bit of a struggle. I think that like some of this is just the natural, like where a president is in this particular moment, but there is sort of something going on that people are really mad about. Like, what do you make of this, from the Republican side of like where his numbers are? How much of it is just where he is? How much of it is, factors that were in his control?
I think what you said is a good point, which is this is kind of the natural flow of these. If you think about the 5th and 6th year of a presidency, that kind of is where people get worn out. The difference here is for the first time in 125 years, we actually had an interrupted presidency. People kind of forgot about the weariness of the first 4 years. He kind of got a fresh look and a fresh shot. I do think that things have gotten challenging for him for a variety of reasons more quickly than you might have expected. But if you think about it as an uninterrupted, not even just 5-6 years, but really decade, I think that explains it to some degree. I mean, that is real deterioration. But think about the things that have happened so quickly. And the other piece of it is, while I think people wanted to go back to the old days of the good Trump economy in the first term, number one, that's hard to reconstitute. There's a lot of things that happen in the meantime. And two, frustration with Biden and the things he was unable to do don't necessarily, aren't immediately fixed just by changing who's in power. So the things that he was elected to do continue to fester from the American consumer standpoint. It's not necessarily his fault, but then you compound it with things like the Iran conflict and a number of other things. I think those coalitions that helped elect him in both ways or in both times frayed a little bit. And so there's 8 months to figure it out, but that's not helpful as we go to the polls and instances like this week.
Right. Yeah. And it does seem like there's been some of the key groups that we famously lost by enormous numbers, especially ones that used to be Democratic strongholds and maybe seem to be coming back a little bit in these special elections that have been playing out. But, Latinos, young people, I think Trump made huge gains there, and those groups seem to be swinging sort of the hardest. Does that feel right? And how do you try to because I think there's a big question in Democratic world. It's like, did Donald Trump fundamentally remake coalition politics and or is this just a red hat party? And when he leaves,
And that is my take that and this is my lens on things, which is so much of Trump, and to the extent he has erred in term 2, is by thinking that his rented voters are owned voters. And those voters were here for a cup of coffee. And then the minute things didn't get better fast, they were
and we're hey, we've been renting those voters for 60 years. Give us our voters back.
Yeah.
And the voters are somebody please deliver something for us.
I hate to talk in riddles, and I think I'll probably do this a couple of times, but I really do think it's similar to the experience of Obama, where he did so well and was such a phenomenal political athlete that it, I think, allowed Democrats to kind of confuse what the Obama coalition is versus who our voters are. And it's very easy to understand the 2016 map if you use 2004 as your baseline.
Totally.
And you consider those 8 years a blip. It doesn't mean that the coalition didn't shift, because over that time you did get more of those high end suburbs, and Republicans did sort of trade for some legacy Dem groups. But at the marginal voter that turns it into either a winning coalition or a wave coalition,
right.
Those are the folks that you can't count on, you can't take for granted.
And it's totally right. I think it's a great analogy, because I think, I mean, one thing that we have been living with ever since is a similar dynamic where I think the 2012 election is kind of remarkable that with people still frustrated with how slow the recovery was going from the recession, that he was still able to, win so handily against Romney. But in 2010, it was a bloodbath. 2014 was a bloodbath. And there was a similar thing where it was people really like Barack Obama, but the party there's erosion at the state level there, and the brand is, and then he obviously finishes his second term, and we have still not figured out how to fix the Democratic brand. And
it is a blessing and a curse, both in terms of riding the coattails of somebody popular or riding the backlash against somebody unpopular.
Right.
And, that comes back around depending on it's a 2-year cycle, 6-year in Senate timelines. I think these things inevitably, people get paired back, and they're there for a variety of reasons. It's not necessarily because they own these voters indefinitely, but
yeah. And I mean, I think it seems like people are frustrated with both parties in a pretty nobody's brand is good. The Democratic brand is bad. The Republican brand is bad. Trump is unpopular. Our leaders are unpopular.
It's very similar in that the signature feature of Republican voters for a long time there, maybe pre-Trump and maybe through Trump, was really disliking the Republican Party per se. And right now, Democratic voters, the people going out to vote against Republicans, they don't love the Democratic Party as such. They just really dislike this president and the party in power. So
totally,
how do you turn that into something durable? That's the riddle that everybody's trying to solve.
100%.
Yeah, that's totally right. I mean, and speaking of sort of post-Trump, and once you get past this, once in a generation personality, where do you think MAGA and that, in Dem world, as it won't surprise you that there's a lot of the bottom is falling out on Donald Trump, and JD Vance is toast, and the MAGA media is turning on him, and there's no, but that feels probably like a extreme exaggeration. But I'm kind of curious.
Well, as you say, one example of this we can pull up is Tucker Carlson this week, saying he's tormented. He goes on his show, he apologizes. We have this screenshot of the clip, I guess, which is not playing, but where, he basically says, I'm sorry I had anything to do with this. We were talking, in prep for the show, and you kind of mentioned, I didn't see that. And I do think there's an interesting thing about how, the libs are this means it's over. And it's it's another day,
Well, this goes back to the fragmentation of media, I think, of, depends what your algorithm is, what your, what your timeline looks like, what your feed looks like. But I do think, in terms of that conversation, in terms of Tucker, I mean, think about his arc. And I told you, I read the Jason Zengerle book, which I actually think is very good in terms of understanding the arc of conservative media, the arc of the party, and how those two things interact. But as an avatar for this journey, you couldn't find a better one than Tucker Carlson, who's kind of perpetually stuck in 2004, where against his better judgment, probably against his impulses and instincts, supports the president, and maybe is in that case supported the war, doesn't want to do it again, and flash forward 20 years, and that's kind of his imperative is keeping this from happening. And now, I'm sure that sort of psychic pain is sort of forever there. But I think if you think about what happened in between, and this goes to the question of the future of the Republican Party, what Trump kind of busted in on and disrupted in some ways was a party that was trying to figure out where to go in the wake of George W. Bush. And they didn't really figure that out. They just said, oh, we like this guy better because these guys are kind of, we don't like, if you think about the contest in 2012, 2008 to a lesser degree, and what it looked like, where it looked like it was heading into 2015 was really conventional, really orthodox, who could be more conservative. And what Trump did was prove like actually voters want something different.
Yeah.
Not a politician. They actually they find it refreshing, somebody that can do transgressive things from an ideological standpoint. Most voters don't think about politics with the kind of depth or coherence that we do, on either side.
Yeah.
And so they actually like it when you can come in and kind of kick the hornet's nest.
And it's funny you say that because I think that the Democratic Party is totally ripe for that exact same kind of like outsider insurgent. Like, we've been in the wilderness, rudderless, leaderless for a while now. And like, I totally think it's plausible, whether that's like a Mark Cuban or another celebrity or like
You heard it here first. Stephen A. Smith, our future nominee,
but I could totally see it happening. Not, maybe not Stephen A. Maybe it's not Mark Cuban. Maybe it's someone we don't know of. Maybe it's Sean Fain. Maybe it's the head of the UAW. Like, I could totally see that happening.
And that's what I've been looking for is like, in my thesis, like broadly is you guys are playing out in a different sequence. It's not exact mirror image, it's kind of a fun house mirror, but like grappling with the same things of like, a populist movement that's initially kind of earnest and thinks they're going to win, and they get smacked down. And then there's this kind of dark period where, it's dark woke, right? Like their dark Tea Party was what kind of MAGA became. And I think, that's what I wonder is when you have your best talent in the party arrayed on stage, but people are still looking for something else. We're seeing it in miniature with the Graham Platners of the world.
Yeah.
People want something different. You kind of had that with Bernie. Bernie's kind of like Ron Paul analog, I guess.
Yeah.
But like without a figure like that, I don't know who it's going to be. Maybe it's an AOC. But again, it's still in the suit. It's still too conventional. If my theory is correct, it just feels like there's an opening for somebody else.
I think that's totally right. And it is interesting if you think back, it's like, we did our best to not have much of a primary in 2016. And Bernie, came in as we were kind of barely, me and Rob were both working for Hillary at the time. And like, we were tracking when he launched his campaign, like Martin O'Malley seemed like the real, the next best option, like that we were more worried about at the beginning. And then you see this, cantankerous, charming old socialist come in and come very close, gave us a real scare. It was a real primary. And then in 2020, Pete Buttigieg comes in as a gay mayor of South Bend, a city of 100,000 people, and he wins the Iowa caucus. So like, I do think it's underrated how much the outsider thing has played from both parties. And Trump just obviously rode it to greater success that like Bernie and Pete both came really close. But yeah, I mean, so President Jennifer Welch, I've had it. So it's gonna be great. Wine
From the
City,
good state of Oklahoma. A Democratic convention in Oklahoma City would be kind of dope, actually.
It's gonna be great. We're all gonna be trans.
I do think, though, that does raise sort of an interesting question about the Republican presidential primary, which, I think whether it's wish casting, I mean, I have literally on this show said I think Tucker Carlson's going to be the nominee. It's not going to be JD Vance. There's this like the tailwinds of the administration, right? I think there's the like, is it going to be JD? Is it going to be Rubio? A lot of people are sort of selling on both of them. On Kalshi, I think JD Vance is at 38%. Rubio at 26, Tucker at 4.7 in third place, just above Trump Jr., baby, running back. And so, I just think it's interesting. I'm curious what you make of this. Like, I think, again, if you were to go on the corner of the internet that I exist on, it's JD Vance imploding, and all of it. Curious what you make of this.
I think there is and has been from the beginning a real desire and I guess sort of schadenfreude, like looking for ways to write off JD Vance. And
from where though? Like from is it within the Republican coalition? From the left. I see.
I think from the the media. I just think
the lamestream media.
Yeah, and look, like if you think about how JD got here, part of the reason it was hard is because of the evolution there, speedy evolution, like nobody really he was neither fish nor fowl. And so like that's always been a challenge. People have always had something to pick at, whether you were MAGA or whether you were a never Trumper, like you had you could find ways to pick at it. But I think the fact that one, he did come in and win, like out of the blue. Like,
Yeah.
this is a guy who'd never done politics before and just sort of dives in at that level. Like that's really difficult to do, number one. You can say Ohio's it's a red state now. Okay, fine. But he was, that was a tough race.
Yeah, Tim Ryan ran
Yeah.
people thought Tim Ryan was a really strong candidate and was outrunning him for a lot of it.
Where is Tim Ryan now?
These shows at the
Doing
conferences.
I was
doing yoga.
in Youngstown or something.
Going to conferences.
Yeah.
But I think he has, whether people want to admit it or not, Mike DeWine ran ahead of him. Okay, fine. Like that's not really here or there. But I think the fact that he came in, won his seat, and leapt to this level of politics as quickly as he did means two things. Number one, irrespective of everything else, there is some innate talent there that not everybody possesses. Number two, that he has, like, there is a curve here where he is only getting better. I personally think he is getting better. As a part of this is me looking at JD Vance and sort of seeing something, one that I don't see elsewhere in the political landscape. We've been in boomer hell for decades. And so having somebody about our age that reflects back to me things that I see being a dad, I literally, like, I wouldn't say I know, JD Vance doesn't know me, but like his kids went to my school. I used to see him literally walking his son to school, holding hands and stuff. Like I've seen the human element of him that I think is appealing, hasn't been showcased in a way that it would be on a presidential.
Yeah, and I remember thinking, like, even in 2024, to Rob's point, like, there's a lot of Schadenfreude, there's a lot of like JD's the worst, and like I think I saw him get better in real time, and I had seen him on Fox News, and I was like, this guy's good. And then, and then all of a sudden you get thrown from like doing the friendly Fox News hit to like, you're the second biggest face in the party. And he had a few rough moments like right after being announced. I remember people being like, he's going to throw him off the ticket and shit. And then by the time the vice presidential debate happened, like he kind of like totally outfoxed. I think Tim Walz expected him to be super hostile, and he came in and did the I'm a nice guy thing, and he just got better in general. Like I would watch his TV hits, I was like, this guy, he's just not. He has some political talent, clearly.
People don't want to hear that. It is kind of a Rorschach test, but I genuinely think he's better than people give him credit for. And I think the other piece of it is, he is set up in a way that under any, like, set aside what you think of JD Vance, like he is set up institutionally to be the obvious person. Right. So if you're rooting for someone else, you have to work backwards and imagine what changed to knock him off track. And with this president, obviously, like literally his whims could determine anything at any point. So like you could never, put it past him. But what you also can't do is project in who you think the best person is, because that's just not how any of this works.
Right. You would, I think it would need to be like a total collapse. Like, I mean, obviously, as we said, Trump's approval is not at a good place right now, but he still maintains, 80% support or whatever from Republicans. And like, if you saw that hitting like below Bush at the end of his, in 04 levels, like maybe then you start to see the party. But I don't think Bush ever had the same like lock over the.
To me, the problem, and I think yes, but the problem to me isn't like that's less of a primary problem. It's that the nomination you get is worth less. It's been degraded by virtue of the fact that the president isn't as popular as he needs to be for Republicans to head into 2028 feeling good. It's hard enough to take the baton from a previous president without that baseline bad environment. But I just think people are trying to stir up drama. Like the Rubio thing is just pure nonsense. Like those guys are exponentially more likely to end up on a ticket together than they are like going head to head.
Interesting. You think there's like a possibility they just run and say we're running the admin ballot?
I know nothing. Like
I'm not saying insider.
But
yeah.
I don't think there's going to be a showdown.
Mm-hmm.
This is just not how they're built. Like they are genuinely friends. Their staff are genuinely friends. Like I think there is more likely to be coordination than there is like conflict.
Interesting.
And it's just like if you think about the incentives of anyone who is currently in the good graces of Donald Trump, that currently has enough time on this, moral coil to think about the future, like forcing it now doesn't make sense unless you're in a weird spot, like or a Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like the people with an incentive to force the issue are not people that are likely to get the blessing of the president. And that's like if you're trying to shoot the moon here, that's what you need to figure out. How am I going to bank shot into a situation where I get the Trump nomination? Unless, like you said, the wheels fall off and for some reason Republican voters don't like Donald Trump anymore. Like, it's just, even if you can snicker at his numbers, like, the people who identify as Republican primary voters are going to like the Republican president.
Right.
I do think it's interesting, though, in the Vance thing last week, Steve Bannon rejecting JD Vance's MAGA heir. We have the article here. It was in the Independent Influential Podcast Host, just like us, declines to back vice president as movement's next leader. I mean, what do you make of that? Oh, by the way, I wanted to highlight the other part, preferring to insist that Donald Trump can serve an unprecedented, unconstitutional third term. What do you?
He's been playing that card.
Yeah, he's playing that game. But what do you make of the fact that Bannon is a little ho-hum on Vance? Does that reflect anything about MAGA and the third term of it all? Like, what is that?
So I hadn't seen that before, but what I did see yesterday was a headline from like the American Conservative. I think, look, I talk about this in the context of the Virginia results.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're upset about that and you think it was a screw up at high levels or whatever, you can't like blame the president for that. So there's a lot of like frustration, like displaced frustration, searching for a whipping boy.
Right.
And I think it's in that case, it's just kind of like, who's the most convenient person to lay your frustrations on.
Right. It's kind of like the thing where anytime Republicans are frustrated enough that they feel like they have to say something on any given issue, and they're like, I just think the president clearly has gotten bad advice from someone else who is not the great man that he is.
Look, what I think is interesting is like Vance is clearly in an uncomfortable position by virtue of the fact that like his identity largely politically and otherwise is tied up in the fact that like he is someone who served during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars and came to regret those. And so he is not in his comfort zone in defending what's going on right here, but also he's charged with going in and negotiating some kind of resolution.
I actually think that, again, another thing that there's kind of been a lot of mockery about JD, from us included. It's, fun to be like, he goes to Hungary and Orban gets smoked and like he's killing popes all the time, whatever. It's just a fun game to play. But like, I actually think, there was a lot of snickering when he was like in a lot of stories being like, his people seem to be seeding the narrative that he, was kind of making the argument against the war. And I actually think that that's been pretty successful. And like, he has ended up in this place from my mind where it seems like he's been a good soldier and he's like doing everything he can. Also, like the Iranians want him to be negotiating because they believe that he wants it to get out of this war and never wanted to get into it. And he's kind of the best that you could imagine threading that needle. Like he does have I do have the, I'm like, I wish JD Vance was just handling this because it seems like he wants to get through that.
That's what he's for. Like, I think you did. I'm curious. but I think that's
Rob's just mad because he's been told he looks like JD Vance after 2 days of Ozempic.
That is true.
But if you think of his utility, I think, and why Trump chose him, I think he likes him on TV. I think he sees and hears JD and hears a version of his impulses reflected back him in a way that sounds nice and sounds coherent and polished, and he likes that. And so I think he actually respects his point of view. And if you're JD, like giving him your honest feedback and then saluting when he decides to do the other thing, like that's the best you can do. That's literally your job.
Right.
2028 whip around.
We move on from the Republican side to the Democratic side, which definitely still exists and is in very good shape. And we take a look at the ranch stack of the field. Gavin Newsom in the markets at 25%. AOC predicted at number 2. Ossoff in third. This is not reflective of necessarily the state of the polling, but that is what the folks who are predicting have to say about it. Pretty static generally. I feel like Ossoff has been ascendant in the last couple of weeks, given libs on Twitter,
given his viral speeches.
Yeah. All right, we move on to Ruben Gallego. A news story today. Gallego partied until the early morning on Colombia trip, despite security warnings. The story saying that he went on a trip to Colombia, went to a dinner, decided to stay out. After embassy staff received what they believed to be a credible report that there was a threat to Gallego's life, and his chief of staff messaging employees to come out. At least one employee told her State Department colleague she received a message from Gallego asking her to come out. Ruben is having a rough go right now, but I will say went out and partied despite the threat on my life. That shows an absolute determination to a good time.
Dude, we need fighters. And a little death threat isn't going to stop this guy from ripping tequila shots. You got to respect that. I mean, yeah, he's got, like, it's hard to know what to make of stories like this. It's like, if there's credible death threats, I'm not going to the club. I'm also tired. I'm old. I'm tired. I can't go to the club. So that part of it is like raises my eyebrows a little bit, but it's also like, yeah, people go on trips and they go out to the bar, and like, would this ever have been a story if he's not already taking, rightfully, like a lot of heat over the Swalwell stuff and questions over like whether he knew anything? You know, I don't know. Sounds like a good time though.
If there was a death threat against me, I would not leave my couch. I'd go out. I barely want to go out now.
Right.
You know, like, oh my God.
In a vacuum, this is just sorry for being awesome.
Yeah.
In the context, it's
Right.
just to painting a picture that I don't know.
It's not good. Yeah.
His staff just has to be like, when he went out there and sort of had that impromptu gaggle, like,
Yeah.
it was just the cringe was very strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing I will say for him on that is like most Democrats would not have they would have just not put themselves in that situation. It's like, and I've been saying to people are like, what do you make of this? Is it fucking up his 2028 hopes? Because like I've written a lot of nice stuff about Gallego. I think he talks like a normal person. Like he won a state that we lost by like 8 points or something. Like he has a lot that is intriguing about him. This is also like a real problem. And what I keep saying is like, if he's being totally honest and there's nothing else that ever comes out, then I think he's handled it pretty well. But like he took a lot of hard lines there. That was like, I never knew anything that Swalwell did wrong. I've never fucked around. Like yada yada yada. And like if that all holds up, he's good. And if it doesn't, then it's like then he's got a credibility problem. Whether or not, even if it's just like, again, in a vacuum, I don't think it's a career ender now to be like if he cheated on his wife or something like that. That's not necessarily a career ender, but it kind of is if you like stood there and were like, absolutely, this has never happened. You know, and then it's like then shit starts coming out, and you're like,
Yeah, and it's just the death by 1,000. I mean, this is the problem: is investigation after investigation, and it may yield very little, or it may yield a bunch of things that like look bad, but are not like certainly anything Swalwell level. But at that point, when you're thinking about vice president, you're thinking about other stuff. It's just like you know, and so it is.
The only other reason that I'm like maybe there's not a lot of there is like they ran everything they could against him in 2024 in that Kerry Lake race. You know, it was one of the top seats, you know, on the map. And I think that like some of these guys that like there are rumors. I will say, I think like with like there's not rumors of like this person was like drugging and raping people like that. That is a different level. If anyone knows that shit and's not telling people, like that's a huge fucking problem. But there are people who you're like, it's no, you know, just talked about like, oh, like he's kind of got some skeletons in the closet. You never know exactly what that means. But like a lot of those people are in states where it's like, you know, they're in a blue or red plus 30 state, and it's like it never comes out until they like run for higher office. But Gallego, it's like you have to think if there's something there.
I'll say this: I think one of the things that I think kept Swalwell from actually kind of not with seeing like the sort of
horrific,
was swift and brutal,
yeah.
But like and part of what inoculated him in the meantime was it became sort of a right wing meme, and the Fang stuff like. It was like old news, and like nobody believed it because it was coming from certain quarters. I think that's kind of happening with Gallego, where like there's a full on like theory on the right where like, oh, that's him in the picture and everything. Right. So like I feel like there's a countervailing thing on the left, or probably be like to defend him as long as there's not other things out there.
But I think a lot of people are reticent because frankly, like he came out super early, which was stupid, like guns blazing, defending Swalwell before all of this stuff came out when it was just rumors. And I was like, that's not going to end well, which it very swiftly ended not well. But then there's like stuff that's taken off that's like pictures of him and Swalwell on these camels, and then you like zoom out and they're with their wives on also on camels. It's like, oh well, then it has like slightly different context. It's like a family vacation or something. Like, but you know, it's hard to know. But if I was him for the next 3 months here, if there's a death threat on your life. Don't go to the club. Don't text female staffers. Like, just chill for a minute. Yeah, don't go to parties with Kash Patel or Pete Hextall. Like, just stay side. Don't black out. You know. Like, trust me. I've had to navigate a lot of dicey situations in my life where people are like, Larry, if you fuck up one more time, and I'm like, all right, fine, I'll stop drinking. For now.
Anyway, and then John Ossoff on Jen Psaki's show last night said he had zero interest in running for president in 2028. He loves serving the state of Georgia. A mildly Sherman-esque statement from a man who we definitely pumped up one show ago. What do you make of that?
Listen, I have genuinely always heard that he's certainly not as obsessed with 2028 as most
we are.
Democrats. Yeah,
As the
certainly
guys-
nobody's
as the
as obsessed
guys
with it as me,
making a
as the
podcast,
guy live blogging.
listening to every- yeah.
But like, I have always heard that. Like, he's not. He's also like 38. Like, he got a lot of time, and I think he's very focused on his Senate race. So I do totally believe that he's not thinking about it right now. I think that may change if he wins by like 8 points in Georgia, and everyone's like, "You're the only savior," or else we're gonna have Trump Jr. as president or whatever. Like, it starts to get hard to like not be interested when a bunch of donors and stuff are telling you you're the guy. Like, so, but I do believe him. I do take him at face value. I also like my Ossoff friends will kill me, but like they got to dial back the amount of times that he's fucking plugging John Ossoff, like electjohn.com or whatever. Like he goes on these hits and he's just like, donate to me. They're going to spend everything.
Dude,
I'm like,
hey,
dude,
take it from the digital guy. Every time you do that, it makes so much goddamn
even
money.
Sa-
It is
even
worth
Psaki
it.
The third time was like, yes, I think you mentioned it.
You mentioned the website. You got to.
He's
It is.
basically only doing these hits to plug donations on his website.
It is. It is unbelievable the way when you do that, the like spikes that you see on Act. It's like people are lemmings, man. So subscribe to Nobody Knows Anything. Hit the button right now or follow our channel. Smash the like and subscribe.
I don't know. What do you make of Ossoff? And like, I mean, does he like safe territory in that Senate race? Do you see him?
That is a seat that Republicans should, in a neutral environment, with all things equal, they should be competing for that seat. I think between the amount of cash Ossoff's been able to bank,
With all those MS hits.
Yeah, it's
ongoing, the ongoing. Well, think about it. He built. I mean, number one, even running for the House against Handel in 2017,
Yeah.
he built a great list then.
Yeah.
He builds a ginormous list in the runoff in 2021.
Yeah.
So he's cooking with gas. He's like operating on a presidential level at this
Right.
point. But like he's gonna have a real race here, and like I don't think people are putting in the toss-up column, but like ordinarily it should be.
Right.
Maybe we'll see who comes out of that.
Yeah, it'll
primary
probably
there.
go to a runoff too, right? So they kind of got it dragged out, kind of like the inverse of what we were going to have in
absolutely. So,
Michigan.
But think like I'm trying to think of another senator who was in that mix where people are like, okay, the insiders are like, oh, he's gonna be the guy. It's like best I can think of is like George Allen.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, like the fastest way to put your seat in jeopardy is to get ahead of yourself
Yeah.
and start thinking about what happens a cycle beyond.
And he's been good about that. I mean, like it's ironically like the thing that keeps going viral that is like convincing everyone he's the best candidate and like, oh, he's definitely running for 2028. I'm like, he's doing a rally in Augusta, Georgia because he's running for a competitive Senate seat. So like in Georgia, so like that's what he's doing. But yeah, it's an interesting. Like I wonder. I kind of think Dooley would be the so on the Republican side, there's kind of like a three-way race with Mike Collins and Derek Dooley, who's a former football coach at Tennessee, and
Buddy Carter, go to Buddy Carter.
and Buddy, yeah, exactly, and Buddy Carter, and like. Kemp, interestingly, Brian Kemp, a very popular Republican governor of Georgia, like picked Derek Dooley, and kind of like there was a lot of internal strife on the Republican side about not getting behind one candidate. But what do you make of that? I just generally think that, like per our earlier conversation, I'd rather be an outsider right now than an insider in general. And if I'm Ossoff, I'd rather run against just like a rank and file Republican House member than like a football coach that's got the outsider appeal. But I don't know. What do you make of that race?
I mean, my general principle in all this stuff is consolidating behind somebody.
Behind somebody,
It doesn't
yeah.
matter who. Like the way I think about these things, it's you want to coalesce the field as early as possible. Like worrying about who the optimal candidate is ends up with a situation where you get a suboptimal candidate, even if they would have been the best. Like once they go through that gauntlet, they're worse off and they're more broke. I mean, it's just a frustrating experience. The Trump political operation found out the hard way in successive cycles. They've mostly done a good job of it here, but Georgia's the one obvious place where it's like, come on, guys, like this was the place where his pick would have mattered.
Yeah.
And like I strongly support party victory client Buddy Carter, but like this is the one place on the map where it's just everywhere else you've got your guy. Like North Carolina, would there have been other potential candidates? Sure. Is Michael Whatley like better off as the one guy in stockpile cash?
Right.
Absolutely no question. So like give me one of those guys, clear the field, and like that's your best bet.
Right. Speaking of Buddy Carter and our friend Ruben Gallego, like I would like there to be, maybe TMZ and DC can get on this. Can we get heights of every member of Congress? Like I did not know until I started tracking 2028 super closely that like Ruben's pretty short, Josh Shapiro's super short, obviously Rahm is short. Pete's like, 5'10", but it's just like a very funny thing. That's like
5'10" is tall.
He's 5'9". He's like 5'9". Where's
You
the
say you're 5'10",
Yeah.
you actually.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But I'm
Honest.
yeah, I just would love to know the height of everything because I'm like learning and I'm like, oh, this guy's very small.
Until you get up on the podium.
Yeah, and then you're like,
"Oh."
yeah, exactly. And then you're like Ossoff's tall, strapping, handsome.
You know,
You
a
know?
couple episodes ago, you
Jewish.
said lectern makers were going to have a great. I think Apple box makers are going to have an amazing 2028.
So true.
You know,
So true.
Midterms.
all right, we are moving on to the midterms, the elections that are actually coming up. We had dueling media reservations today in the House, guys. This is the most consequential political story in America. House Majority PAC this morning announcing that, which is the Democratic super PAC that spends in House races, announcing that they had made $272 million in initial ad reservations for the midterms. So this is sort of pre-buying your ads. You can cancel them, but saying how much you're going to lay out for your ads as you go forward. At the very same time, CLF, the Republican side, announced $153.1 million in initial fall ad buys to protect the Republican House majority. So that is twice as much on the House side as the Dem side. Obviously, TV reservations, a little hypothetical based on, you can say however much you want to spend and then pull it back. But the narrative coming into today, obviously, was the money mismatch between the Republican side, which has a shit ton more money sitting on the sidelines than the Democratic side, which is so this is pretty interesting. James Blair, the Trump White House political director, saying this is fake. Democrats don't have this money. The Journal is acting like the DCCC press shop here. What's not fake is massive GOP money, which will make every House Dem fight for their political life. Republicans can sleep well. I mean,
that is true.
It is,
I went and
yeah.
saw the FEC. I was like, I'm gonna look at the FEC report. I was like, they have only $50 million, so that's they need 5x that to pay for this ad buy. But yeah,
and House Majority PAC is making a bet that the money will be there at the end. Which here's the thing. I think as you get closer to, this is not me like talking House Majority PAC's book, but it's like as you get closer to the election and it becomes clear that Democrats have a chance on the super PAC side where the money is much more transactional, I think they are making a bet that that money will come in later rather than earlier. The state of play, though, is tough, not just for HMP, for basically the entire Democratic field because of the Republicans.
They've been more successful at fundraising than, say, the DNC.
Yeah. Yes, I would say this sort of dovetails, I think, interestingly with Patrick Ruffini, who had an article in his, I think it looks like a Substack, his Substack, basically making the case, he had laid out on Twitter before the ways that, basically Republicans could win. His argument is essentially the most plausible path is negatively defining the Democrats, the kind of scorched earth campaign that Trump enjoys running and knows how to run. And so, what does seem to be coming for Democrats, even though the wind is at the Democrats' back, is a shit ton of money disproportionately, a shit ton of ads, and a scorched earth campaign. I mean, the point that Ruffini is making in this article is doing the Biden thing of being like, well, the numbers are getting better, and and the chips, there's fewer of them, and there's more of them in the package. Like, that's actually not going to be the way. It's just burn down these awful Democrats because there's a lot of voters who hate the Democrats more. Yeah. That's the theory. I'm curious for the Republican view of this. Can the money make up the gap of the vibes? Is this just cope? It does feel like money can only make up so much.
Yeah, I mean, you optimize for what you have, right? Like, I think in any race, you kind of have, and go on the micro level, like you don't need the greatest candidate. You just can't have a disaster. You don't need all the money, but you certainly need to hit that threshold. You don't need the greatest environment, but it can't be, a complete dumpster fire. And so it's kind of a sliding scale of all those things. And if you can amplify your spend, if you can be there with the resources, then I think that's, that is what they need to lean into because the environment isn't great. They need to get the best candidates where they can. I think Patrick's absolutely right, but I think that's evergreen. Like,
Yeah.
doing like put your outside groups coming in to try to prop you up in the positives, like that's probably not gonna, like it's certainly not in this.
Tell it the future
environment.
forward.
But I do think
Shots fired.
particularly in an environment where voters are not crazy about the party in power, but they don't like the Democratic Party.
Yes.
It is easy to lean into those vulnerabilities and
Yeah.
play up the things that people don't like. Will it work? We'll have to see. I think the interesting thing is the playing field is, as we understand it, is super narrow. I think the HMP piece of that is interesting. They're playing offense in 80% of their theoretical funny money states or districts. But that's gonna be the question. Like if Dems are gonna have the kind of night that they want to have, they're gonna have to bust out of the couple dozen seats that everybody understands to be competitive.
Yeah, and I mean, Rob can attest. I'm very low on like Democrats in 2028, but I have been huffing the hopium on 2026, and so like I do think that we should be competing in those like Corey Mills like R plus Republican plus 14 whatever 12 like districts. I think we can expand the map that way. I mean, like I did laugh at the line. The most plausible path is negatively defining the Democrats. It was like plausible path.
Plausible.
We're negatively defining ourselves for 40 years running. Like, what? You don't need any help. But I agree with you that just like there was just new Cook political polling across battleground districts that came out today, and I thought there were a couple interesting things there. Dems were like +6 in the suite of 36 districts that are Trump +2 districts. So good swing there. And when we have a little bit of an enthusiasm edge, but there was an interesting slide about how most Democrats were voting against Republicans and Trump, whereas there were more Republicans voting for Republicans and Trump. And so it does say to me that we still have this massive brand problem. And to your point, if we're super unpopular and nobody knows what we stand for, and then an avalanche of money comes in reminding people of all the things that they hate, it's like even if you're just keeping would-be Democratic voters home, that can make a difference.
I don't know. It can, but I just think that the terrain here does not favor,
I agree.
money on an unpopular message is.
What we're seeing, whether it's in Virginia, whether it was in the fall in Virginia and everywhere that had elections, like there's not a mobilization problem on the left.
Yeah,
correct.
So can you depress some of that? Maybe, but people are just rabidly smashing the Act Blue button.
Yeah.
Give me the early
from every country.
Exactly. The bail I want to do the first day it's even possible. But look, I think the other piece of this is, Dem candidates are raising good money. It's the institutional money that's not there. Republicans have a huge partisan advantage in the outside groups. I think the other thing that we're not really talking about, not thinking about, is the outside. I mean, it used to be a cycle or two ago that like the only game in town was House Majority PAC, Senate Majority PAC, CLF, SLF. Now you have half a dozen $100 million, $200 million outside groups that aren't even necessarily partisan. They're coming in on an issue basis, picking races and playing in races based on things that we're not even like that aren't a clean cut parochial than partisan. So how that money comes in and chooses to manifest, like I think that's going to be really interesting.
And there's still this big looming question. I don't expect you're going to break any news here, but like MAGA
But if you
Inc.
do.
No, I don't know if you would have any insight anyways, but like MAGA Inc. is this Trump entity that's just sitting there with like $400 million, and like they didn't spend on Virginia redistricting, they haven't spent in primaries, and people are just like, everyone's like, when is this money coming and where's it going? And nobody seems to know.
I think this MAGA Inc. spend in Virginia would have been an in-kind donation to
that's true.
Schamberger. But no, it is the question. And
that is tough when the name is literally MAGA Inc. Like you should have, I mean, you keep
all their ads were featuring Obama anyways,
exactly.
I think that's the test, particularly in an environment where, look, for Republicans to have a good night, his numbers just need to, period. But how they choose to use that spend, like I genuinely don't know. I think it could be really important,
right?
But man, I don't imagine that it'll be to the like narrow strategic advantage of the Republican Party as such. It's going to be furthering the president's
right.
And you got to imagine like 100 of that is going to polymarket bets about where they're going to spend. So
it is kind of like this paradox where it's like, to win, you guys have to juice you got to get that Trump base to turn out. And at the same time, like making Trump front and center is a tough, it's a tough situation.
You're gonna wear it either way, so you might as well lean into it and take it for what it's worth. Like that's Republicans are not yet comfortable with the idea that they need all the people to vote,
Right.
as many as possible. They're in a mindset where it's like there's such self-doubt over whether like more is better. And the obvious answer is
Yes.
these days it is, because the Dems are voting anyway.
Right.
So you need to bring that marginal voter out. He might not be a Republican, but he's more likely to be a Republican than the people that already voted.
100%.
Our
Which is why I think we need to pass the SAVE Act.
Yeah.
With important,
Exactly.
with critical restrictions.
If you don't have a passport,
If you don't have
why are you
passport
even here?
stamped twice, if you don't have a New Yorker tote bag, you are not
exactly.
voting,
Our
because
marginal
that is
voter,
how we know.
our marginal voter like went to Harvard but didn't get into Yale law. That's like what we've been reduced to.
Jesse, do you want to take the
Yeah,
pitches?
yeah. I mean, like, we're going along here, but that's because we got the best guest we've had so far. There was this Jonathan Martin piece the other day about, I thought was really smart, as is typical of J Mart. There's a bunch of Trump tests coming up that are going to test like his power. That, you know, how much does a Trump endorsement still just single-handedly determine every primary? We've got these Indiana legislative primaries coming up where he's trying to oust a bunch of people that didn't get on board with redistricting, and then Louisiana Senate, where he's behind Letlow, who's running against Bill Cassidy and John Fleming, and then the Massie primary in Kentucky, where he's trying to oust Massie. I'm just kind of curious, like, do you think that, I don't know, what are your thoughts on this stuff, and like, do you think it fundamentally changes how people are dealing with Trump if these, you know, if some of the Trump foes are victorious here?
The outcome matters. The fact that we're even talking about it is the fascinating part. Like the fact that you have state legislators in a deep red state picking that fight, and then trying to live to tell about it is confounding in its own right. I asked a friend if the president's like ongoing power rests on a state senate election in Indiana, like we're already
Right. Yeah, you're already
finished.
Right.
But I think it's more the fact of it that's interesting. There's even like a kind of remnant that's trying to fight against him. What end? I'm not really sure.
Right.
Parochialism, I guess, in Indiana, but there's a Pence background in the back, or in the underlying piece of it. Louisiana is much more straightforward in that no one has really tested this yet. Like Romney saw the writing on the wall; he was ready to go.
Right.
No one who in the House races, the only places where it's happened are in like top 2 states where
Right.
Newhouse and Valadez, like Washington, California, are just fundamentally different. You're not going to win a Republican primary,
Right.
but you don't have to necessarily in those states. In Louisiana, guess what? You suddenly have to win a Republican primary.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, it's not looking like it's going to be Bill Cassidy's.
Right.
I don't think any of these are going to dictate like how strong he still is, but the fact that we're having the fight, I think, tells you that it's even a question.
Right.
It's
Right.
indicative of where we are.
Yeah, right. The typical play is like, Donald Trump's bad and also I resign.
Yeah.
Like,
Maine Senate.
Before we move on, we should talk really quickly about Maine, where Donald Trump's low Maine approvals are making things hard for Susan Collins. I think it is sort of interesting the ways in which so much of this primary is teed up in the lens of like what's happening on the Dem side, but everyone sort of forgets that there's like an absolute slayer of dreams on the other side of this, and that Collins has really, like, she has outperformed polling every single time. So I just think it's an interesting situation, and yeah, curious for the read.
Susan Collins sits on the throne of skulls.
Yeah.
And then look, I think there is an underlying question. It has nothing to do with Susan Collins, and it really doesn't even have to do with Platner or Mills. It's a fundamental question of, she obviously surprised the world in 2020, where she obviously has such a faithful and strong independent brand and sort of a faithful base there. People that don't vote based on Dear R, they vote based on we know and trust Susan Collins. And I would bet on that until it doesn't happen.
right.
And I think the real question is interesting for when I saw the Maine, like when I saw Mills even looking to get in, I had immediate 2000 Delaware flashbacks to Mike. So who I loved dearly, was a great guy, would have made a great senator. But man, you could tell the minute that he got in that it just was not the right moment. It did not fit the zeitgeist. The test is Graham Platner or Christine O'Donnell, right? Like,
Right.
he's got some
He is not a
issues.
witch.
He's not a witch, but he's also not a Nazi. So that's,
And also maybe not an Oysterman.
Yeah.
but I think it really just does. This is a binary of like, are people still voting on the candidate, or are they voting just on like base partisan instincts, and that'll be the test of the Maine electorate.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think there are a lot of these races where, we talked last time, I was gassing up long shots like Mississippi and South Carolina, but like the last time all of these races happened was in 2020, and Trump was juicing that Republican base turnout. And it will be interesting to me to see how a Susan Collins fares when some of those people don't show up and our beloved philosophy majors dominate the electorate.
And I also think that there's an interesting dynamic with Graham Platner where you could imagine the sort of Jared Golden district voter being for him, but the coast being a little bit scandalized, like the Shelley Pingree crowd.
Yeah.
There's actually kind of an interesting cross current there that I find interesting. But like it really just tracks along. Okay, where are we in this era? 2020 felt like kind of peak resistance, sort of anti-Trump sentiment. Are we further along now? I mean, or have things kind of plateaued? I'm just not sure.
Right. Yeah.
The Senate odds on the predictive markets have it basically a dead even race. I cannot bring myself to believe that is the case, but it just sort of is starting to feel like things are breaking in the right direction. I'm curious the view of this from the Republican side. What is the steel man case for Republicans on the Senate? Is it even a steel man case? Like, is it crazy for Democrats to be in a position where we're thinking about winning the Senate?
It's not crazy. I mean, look, like the Republicans have a 3-seat cushion. And so the question is where that 4th seat comes from for Democrats. It's easy enough to count to 2 just based on like thinking about the battlegrounds. Like, obviously Maine is a state that they won presidentially. You could imagine winning that. Maybe it's easier to win North Carolina, an open seat in a state where they've, not been able to win since 2008, but certainly been nipping at the heels. Roy Cooper has more money than God. In a neutral environment, they can feel okay about that one. So you get to 2 reasonably easy. The question is, okay, where's 3, where's 4? You obviously can't give any back. So that's where we get into Georgia. That's where we get into Michigan, Hampshire. Those are states that would be competitive in a neutral environment.
Right.
In an environment where Democrats are winning in North Carolina or Maine, then those are probably much tougher lifts. But it goes back to Michigan primary, like things like that. I think there are multiple races where Democrats are going to be faced with the same proposition that Republicans had every primary really since 2010 of, are we going to blow a winnable race by putting up a candidate that is not going to optimize?
Right. And I think one of the interesting things that's happening on our side is like there's more of a real question that's like, is an Abdul El Sayed like a significantly weaker? I mean, the early polling indicates that he is weaker than McMorrow and Stevens, but like, this has happened with the Platner stuff too. I was kind of early in saying like, and I certainly got blowback and then have had to respond to many stories about his Reddit posts and whatnot when people were like, you still love this guy? I was like, all I'm saying is like, I think he's a stronger candidate in this environment to run against Susan Collins than like a 79-year-old governor. But I think I think that question is interesting. It's like, we don't really know. It's not like some of those races you were like, oh my God, if this witch lady wins, we are so toast. Whereas Democrats were like, who is electable anyway?
There's been 2 things at play. Number one, like Democrats have been the beneficiary so many times of Republicans just like shooting themselves in the foot in the primary that it looks like a one-sided thing.
Right.
And Chuck Schumer, until now, has always been able to work his will in the background, direct traffic such that these primaries don't break out into the open. So this is the first real test of what does it look like? What does it feel like if you leave seats on the table?
Right.
But again, like you need to get to 4. We've maybe gotten to 2. That's when you get in, okay, where's the next rung is much more difficult where you need one in Texas. Okay, Talrico is going to raise its money. Maybe if you get Paxton, okay, theoretically, maybe. I don't think Republicans are going to let that one go. They'll spend there rather than, anywhere else. Ohio,
Alaska.
Okay. Similar, like Ohio is, Sherrod Brown, when he was invincible. Now that he's been beaten, I don't think it has the same thing. And what I'd say about Ohio as well as Alaska is, the other places are either open seat opportunities or even potentially like a primary upset. Beating an incumbent who doesn't have scandal, who's like kind of generic that depends almost entirely on the environment.
National atmospherics. Yeah.
I would, Huston's going to have a tough election.
Yeah.
But I would still feel pretty good. Sherrod Brown, this goes as outside groups. Those outside groups are going to come in and nuke him.
Yep.
6 ways a Sunday. I think Democrats are really bullish on Alaska, and they got a great candidate. Like I tip my hat in that sense. But if you remember why Mary Peltola got to the House in the first place, is because she benefited. Like ranked choice voting doesn't inherently benefit Democrats. It benefits Democrats when the Republican Party is divided.
Yeah,
Why was the Republican Party divided? Because
Sarah
they got to
Palin.
choose between like literally Sarah Palin and like something that looked like a flavor of kind of bland Republicanism. That division itself led Mary Peltola to seem like some kind of like golden mean. And, we'll have to see what the environment looks like. But Dan Sullivan doesn't have any competition on the right. Like
Yeah.
there's no similar dynamic there. She is a very good candidate for who she is, but it would have to be like on a night where she wins. I think a lot of bad
Yeah.
things have happened. So like trying to cobble your way, this seat, that seat, I think it's just like, oh, the dam kind of broke and
Right.
there's
Yeah.
a number of seats rather than trying to,
Right.
one here, one there, one there.
Yeah.
I still think the funniest scenario will be when we flip the Senate by one seat and then John Fetterman immediately switches parties.
He's
And we
waiting,
lose the
baby.
minority.
He's on deck.
I feel like the most democratic way to not have the majority.
Redistricting scorecard.
One quick thing, and then we'll close. Obviously, redistricting on Tuesday. Democrats pulling it out, a narrow victory in Virginia's redistricting battle. Definitely a story of mobilization on the progressive side, but definitely some green shoots for Republicans as well. A internecine fight about whether folks should have spent between Mark Short in particular. MAGA groups are spending millions to primary Indiana state senators over a single seat, but hardly spent. Quickly, what is your take on redistricting, how it went down, how are Republicans feeling, and what do you make of this sort of the shots that are being fired at the White House team?
So, I mean, I think this is the surprise here was that Democrats would have the fortitude and political will to go this far.
Yeah.
I think that genuinely surprised Republicans when they started this thing. Oh, 5 seats in Texas, that's easy. Okay, they clap back in California. We'll just go to these other states. Indiana was the first squeaky wheel. Ohio, it hasn't panned out. There's a miscalculation both in terms of how easy it would be to get state legislators to draw districts that weren't their idea.
Right.
And these are parochial exercises. So that was error one. Error two was not realizing just how the white hot rage of Democrats. And I took Newsom's credit, like in the context of a 2028 and like trying to show you fight, like he kind of lit the way. And I think there was a lot of skepticism from Republicans and otherwise, like whether he could get away with that, either by passing it or legally or otherwise. And then people were like, wait, we can just do things. And so Virginia, the fascinating one there is that I keep coming back to is like the only reason they were able to do this was there was a special session that was called for the budget like a year and a half ago that never got gavelled. It was a Glenn Youngkin called session.
That's
And
amazing.
Just because they wouldn't have been able to call a new session because you needed 2/3 of the votes. But
Right.
because that session had never technically adjourned, they were able to just go like, yep, we're going to do it. And so,
Crazy.
that's 4 seats right there.
Yeah.
And in a house where you have a 3-seat advantage, I mean, that's literally the difference.
Yeah.
Are
Are Republicans feeling, is there a feeling in some corners of the Republican Party of like, oops, like shouldn't have done this, or
I don't think it wasn't a broad-based Republican idea. It was a White House thinking this might not be a great cycle. We don't want to go through, like, we need to structurally reinforce whatever we can to maintain our majorities. And as a tactical matter, that makes perfect sense. As a
Yep.
strategic matter, it relies on you assuming you have more political fortitude than the other side. So I think it misreads like the incentives for Democrats. And, the other piece of this is no matter how this netted out, like Republicans pick up 5 on net, that's all on paper. You still have to go out and win the races.
Right.
Yeah.
So like part of this, I've seen people who are mad. So like, we need to go out and do what Virginia did. We're going to draw like all the seats red in this district. Like that is setting yourself up for in a bad election cycle, losing more seats. Yeah.
And they already did it. One last thing before we go. Rich McCormick with a very funny proposal to make DC square again by bringing Arlington and Alexandria back in. Such a great little like Republican clever thing. You know what? I'll take it, man. If it means we can make DC a state, we'll do it.
I have a whole thing about how I want to unify Dakota bring Dakota back
I think
together.
that's right. If we make DC Square,
West Wing subplot.
it
Must-
have been.
probably.
It might have been.
I own a lot of onedakota.org and other such things. You know, I feel like
You're a single issue voter.
Oh yeah, I just want Dakotans to be unified again. You know.
Thank you guys for tuning in again to our silly little show. You guys are truly sickos. Thank you to Liam Donovan for coming on. Really appreciate the time. And Jesse, whatever.
Fine. You're fine. No, this was awesome. Thanks for coming, man.
Thanks for coming on. Tune in Sunday night for more Where That Came From. Thanks so much.
Nobody knows anything.